Good morning, it's Friday the 10th of June and we're live in London for today's special briefing for schools and sixth form colleges on the graduate job market and degree apprenticeships. I'm Martin Birchall, editor of the Times Top 100 Graduate Employers and Managing Director of High Flyers Research. By way of a brief introduction, we're an independent research company that's been researching graduate recruitment and the graduate job market since the mid-1990s. Each year we interview final year students at key UK universities to find out their career plans and understand what they're looking for in their first graduate job. The research is used to compile the annual rankings for the Times Top 100 Graduate Employers, showcasing the country's most sought after graduate organisations. And we conduct regular research with these employers to find out details of their graduate vacancies, starting salaries and what they're looking for in the new graduates they recruit. Over the next hour, we'll be looking at the very latest findings from each of these pieces of research. We'll be speaking to some of the country's best-known graduate employers, and we'll be exploring the alternative route to graduate employment that degree apprenticeships are increasingly offering for sixth form school leavers. Now, we're delighted that so many of you have joined us for today's briefings. More than 700 careers and university admissions staff, heads of sixth form and head teachers from schools and sixth form colleges right across the UK have registered to watch the programme. So wherever you're watching our summer briefing from, and whether you're in the sixth form centre, in the UCAS office, or even in the classroom, it's great to have you with us. We hope you'll find the information from the briefing useful when you're advising your sixth formers on their future career options. Now it's time for our first guest, and I'm really pleased that Sian Griffiths, Education Editor at the Sunday Times, is joining us to help us take stock on how universities and student life have been affected by the coronavirus pandemic over the past 2 years. Sian, welcome to Summer Briefing. Thanks very much for joining us. I'd like to just start by really just exploring how universities have dealt with the pandemic. It's obviously been 2 years of incredible disruption across schools, sixth forms and universities, but how have the universities themselves dealt with it?
I think it's been a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. Universities were very badly affected by the pandemic, and there were big outbreaks of COVID infection on many campuses. Universities responded in different ways. So we had scenes at Manchester, for instance, where students were locked down and ended up protesting about that and pulling down fences that had been erected around their halls of residence. And some students extremely unhappy about the way they were isolated during the pandemic. But against that, many universities, did their best. I think the key thing that most universities did was move teaching online. So they continue to teach students, but most of the the lectures, the tutorial seminars, everything was moved online. And that was a big learning curve for universities. They got better at doing it as the pandemic went on. But it was something that left many students, I think, dissatisfied. They had signed up for face-to-face teaching. They had signed up for the whole student experience, which involves sports and drama and nightclubs and everything really, and they didn't get that, and it wasn't university's fault. The pandemic happened, but I think it's left students with a feeling of, what are we getting for £9,250 a year?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Value for money?
I mean, Sian, it's interesting with that backdrop, given how so many students really did struggle over those 2 years. I was just looking back at the admissions figures, and actually the numbers who went to university actually increased in both 2020 and 2021, and to the point where I think we've got a slide which shows 30,000 extra school leavers going to university last year compared to before the pandemic. So is that just people not taking a gap year, not able to travel, or is this a genuine increase in demand?
It's a combination of things. I mean, certainly people couldn't take a gap year, and there weren't many options for students apart from, for school leavers, apart from going to university, with so many places closed down, not hiring graduates and so on over the pandemic. I think it's a combination of things, but certainly there is an increase in demand for university places. I did an interview with Claire Marchant, who is the chief executive at UCAS. I did it last summer, and she was saying that not only was there an increase in demand for university places last summer, but she was predicting that this would go on until 2025, and that teenagers would face unprecedented competition to get into universities over the next 5 years, with more than 1 million applying, she thinks, by 2025. Now, that would be a 40% increase on last year's figures, which were around 700,000. It's driven by a number of things. It's driven by, it's a kind of triple whammy. There's a 20% increase in the number of 18-year-olds in the UK by 2026. More 18-year-olds are applying to university, so more of the cohorts every year are applying to university. And also there's been a surge in overseas students again, led by China. So 3 reasons why there's going to continue to be an increased demand for university places in the next few years.
And if we look specifically at this September, of course, lots of sixth formers leaving school, finishing their A-levels at the moment. What do we think in terms of the number of places that will be available? Because obviously the last 2 years have been flattered by the more promising A-level results that have been sort of awarded as opposed to taken. So what's your hunch for this September? Will the numbers continue to increase?
Yes, I mean, the numbers applying for university, according to Claire Marchant, and I see no reason why UCAS's modelling would be incorrect, will continue to increase. And the demand will be particularly sharp for places at top universities, Oxford, Cambridge, some of the Russell Group, and of course for popular courses, so medicine, dentistry. Those courses, they will be ferociously competitive, I think.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of A-level results, what the government's planning to do is issue fewer top A-level grades this year compared to, well, I mean, overall, the government doesn't issue the grades, but it's kind of working with Ofqual to set parameters for the numbers of A and A star grades that will be awarded this summer. And what looks clear now is that there's going to be fewer A and A star grades awarded at A level than there were last year when teachers were assessing youngsters, but there will be more than in 2019 before the pandemic started. So again, that's going to make application to top university courses, which demand very high grades, that is going to increase the competition for those courses even further.
And for those who do arrive in September, October, starting their degree, can they expect fully in-person teaching, or is it likely to be a hybrid model going forward?
This is something I've been writing about quite a lot in the last 12 months. I think it will be a hybrid model going forward at nearly all universities. I don't think anybody is going to get rid of online teaching. They like online teaching. Many of them have overseas students still, and if for whatever reason overseas students can't arrive at the start of term, it's useful to have a hybrid model where you can teach your lectures online to students who may not have arrived to start their courses, students who are sick. So I don't think universities are going to give up on the hybrid model. And this is going to be quite a big issue going forward, I think, because students clearly don't like the online model as much as they like face-to-face teaching. And I would say to any child applying to university or to their parents, look, really drill down into how much face-to-face teaching are you going to get on your course in September. Try and get the university to spell out how many hours will be face-to-face, which elements will be face-to-face and which elements will be online. And you might want to factor that into your decision-making about which course you go for, because I think that's going to continue to be it's going to carry on throwing up tensions, I think, between students and universities in some campuses next year.
Sian, that's really good advice to finish on. Thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated. And we'll speak again as the numbers going to university continue to increase. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, for the first of today's research briefings, we're going to take a look at the results of our research with final year students from the class of 2022, who are just about to make the transition from university to the working world. Many of those graduating this summer left school or sixth form college in the summer of 2019 and had just one normal term at university before the onset of the coronavirus pandemic in early 2020. We interviewed final year students at 30 key universities across the country to find out how they coped with graduate job hunting during the pandemic and what their plans are for the future. The universities included within the survey are those which are most often targeted by national and international employers for their graduate recruitment. Using a network of more than 1,000 campus interviewers, we spoke to over 12,000 final year students at the end of February. Now, the first question we asked were what were students planning to do after university? Well, you'll see that just 27% of this year's finalists were expecting to start a full-time graduate job, with a further 16% expecting to look for their first job after graduation. 4% think they'll be doing a temporary or voluntary job, and 2% plan to run their own business or work freelance. More than a quarter are planning to do a postgraduate course this year. 12% are hoping to take time off or go travelling, and the remaining 12% of the class of 22 are still deciding what to do next. So in total, 43% of this year's finalists expect to start either start a graduate job or be looking for one after university, which is a very similar profile to the years before the pandemic and a considerably more optimistic outlook compared to our 2021 survey. At individual universities, though, there is a very considerable range in the numbers expecting to join the graduate job market. At universities like Aston, Bath, Surrey, the London School of Economics, Southampton, Warwick and Loughborough, all institutions that have very strong links with graduate employers through their engineering or business courses, at least half of finalists expect to start a graduate job. But by contrast, only a third of those at Imperial College London, Liverpool and Glasgow think they'll start a graduate job after university. But all three of these are among the universities that have the highest number of students planning to do a postgraduate course instead. And it seems that the subject of study makes a big difference too. For those studying for computer science, engineering or business or management degree, between half and 3/4 are confident of joining the job market, whereas just a third of those studying arts or humanity courses think they'll land a graduate job this year. So those are finalists' career plans. What type of graduate jobs have the class of 2022 been applying for? Well, the top graduate destination for 2022 is consulting, and more than a fifth of all finalists have either already applied for consulting roles or plan to do so in the coming months. The numbers applying for consulting jobs and graduate roles in investment banking, this year's fourth most popular destination, have reached an all-time high. And demand for graduate jobs in law, technology, asset and investment management and actuarial work has increased this year too. Although they remain highly popular sectors, fewer students have applied for media or marketing jobs, and applications for accounting and engineering roles are lower this year too. The number of students applying for teaching jobs has dropped to a 15-year low, despite a growing demand for new teachers. So how are the class of 22 doing with their graduate job applications? By the time we spoke to them at the end of February, almost a third of finalists had received one or more definite job offers from graduate employers. It's interesting to see that many of these offers were as a result of successful work experience during university, whereas only half were as a result of applications that students made during their final year. A proportion of finalists successfully received offers through both routes. The universities with the highest proportion of finalists who'd had graduate job offers, including the London School of Economics, Warwick, Bath, Aston and Surrey. By contrast, Liverpool, Southampton, Sheffield and Manchester had the fewest students who'd received definite offers. It's worth remembering that the numbers with a graduate job offer will have increased since the survey took place in February, and some employers will continue to make job offers over the summer for their September graduate entry. Now, we've seen that the majority of early graduate job offers came after students had completed successful work experience whilst at university. And despite all of the pandemic disruption, a large proportion of the class of 2022 managed to do some work experience during their studies. 1 in 8 did a formal placement year as part of their degree. A fifth took part in online or in-person taster courses or internships in their first year. And almost a quarter did virtual or in-person summer internships in their penultimate year at university. In total, 42% of this year's finalists had done some form of internship, vacation work or course placement during their degrees. Again, there were significant variations at individual universities, with 3/4 of Bath students completing work experience, 3 times the number at Newcastle, Liverpool or Sheffield. It's worth pointing out here that students who had secured work experience whilst at university were 3 times more likely to have received a graduate job offer compared to those with no work experience at all. So what are the class of 2022 hoping for in their first graduate job? 2/5 of finalists who are applying for graduate jobs said they wanted to join a national or international company, often because of the perception of high quality training and structured development programs. 1/5 are keen to join small or medium-sized firms, and 1 in 7 would like to work for the government or elsewhere in the public sector. We check where in the country new graduates are planning to work. The answer's always been London throughout the time we've conducted the survey, but it's interesting that a record number of students have chosen the capital this year. The next most popular destinations for the class of 22 are the Midlands, the North West and the South West. In terms of starting salary, after a dip in expectations last year, this year's finalists are much more bullish and are expecting to start work on an average graduate starting salary of £27,100. over £2,000 more than in 2021. However, this national average hides some very big differences at individual universities, with a range of more than £13,000 between the highest and lowest expectations. Job hunters at the London School of Economics, Oxford, Imperial College, Warwick, UCL, Cambridge and Bath expect an average of at least £30,000, whereas those at Liverpool, Lancaster, Cardiff and Glasgow think they'll earn less than £24,000 for their first graduate job. Perhaps understandably, given all of the pandemic restrictions that they've been through at university, students' top priority for their first job after graduation is to have a good social life through work. But in second place is getting a job that allows you to give something back to society. This was classed as very important to over a third of all graduate job hunters. The research highlighted the other aspects that have increased in importance year on year, including having a better work-life balance by not having to work evenings or weekends. And it's interesting to note that the pandemic has had a big impact on students' priorities. A third said it was very important to them to be based in an office or on-site for their first graduate job rather than at home, and just 1 in 6 prioritised being able to work from home at all. Finally, the survey examined finalists' views on the future. Job hunters were asked, once they'd secured their first graduate job, how long did they think they'd stay with their employer? More than half thought they'd be likely to leave in the first 2 years, with just 1 in 6 new graduates expecting to stay for 5 years or longer. On average, finalists said they'd be with their first employer for around 2.5 years. And looking further ahead, the last question on the survey asks finalists what they might have done by the age of 30, one of the really big first milestones for new graduates, typically 8 or 9 years after leaving university. Almost 2/3 of the class of 22 thought they would own their own house or flat by then, and half expected to be married. After all of the restrictions of the past 2 years, there's a considerable appetite for travel and overseas experiences, either for work or pleasure, and 2/5 of this year's finalists expect to have completed postgraduate courses or professional qualifications by the age of 30. On the work front, over 1/5 of new graduates think they'll reach a senior management position, and a similar proportion think they'll be earning top salaries of £100,000 or more. But only 1 in 6 students believe they'll have cleared their student debts and loans by the age of 30. This, sadly, is almost certainly true, given that graduation debts for university students are continuing to rise. The average debt for the class of 22 is now £42,400, despite more than 60% of students receiving help from their parents, paying their tuition fees or their living costs at university. So there we are. This year's new graduates have had one of the most difficult and most limiting university experiences imaginable. But whilst they don't share the optimism of pre-pandemic cohorts, many have been successful in finding their first graduate job. Now, if we ever needed a reminder of just how important careers and UCAS guidance is for sixth formers, we checked with the class of 2022 about how they felt about their university choices now that they're about to graduate. Well, as you can see, 1 in 3 students said they wished they'd chosen a different degree subject. 1 in 4 said they should have studied at a different university, and 1 in 6 thought they shouldn't have come to university at all and done an apprenticeship instead. Now, given how hard all of these students work to get into some of the country's top universities, this is such a disappointing outcome. And given these results, it's not surprising that over a third of finalists complained that their school or sixth form college didn't advise them well when they were making their university and subject choices. Now, I should mention that copies of all of the research and information we're presenting today will be available early next week on the resources page that accompanies the summer briefing. I'll give you more details of that before the end of the programme, but one of the things we're including on the page is an exclusive 2-part documentary that we made to accompany this year's student research, following 4 final year students during their last year at university as they applied for graduate jobs. It's a revealing insight into just how difficult it's been for the class of 2022 to job hunt during a pandemic. The first of these students is Rachel Hart. She's a third-year student studying philosophy, politics and economics at the University of Oxford. We met her last October at the beginning of the autumn term.
Despite the best efforts of the pandemic, I've managed to get quite a bit of work experience in, although quite a lot of that was before the pandemic as well, which helps. So most recently, my sort of job over the pandemic, I worked at Sainsbury's, just on the shop floor, stacking shelves, processing things through the checkout, cleaning. Nothing particularly exciting, but I really enjoyed that job. It gave me, social interaction at a time where that wasn't actually legal, and a really cohesive team, which I really valued when the pandemic was quite hard.
Rachel's family background has encouraged her to look at graduate jobs in the public sector.
Both of my parents work in the public sector, and that's always something I've been massively inspired by. They work really hard. But in addition to this, I come from quite a middle class background. I've been extremely lucky, although worked hard to get to, this university. But I don't want to spend my career essentially building on that privilege. I want to sort of use it in a constructive way.
From the beginning, she's had one particular employer in mind.
There was something really appealing to me about the civil service fast stream because it was a very sort of, structured route. And as you sort of come out of education, there's not as much a defined path as there is sort of every moment of your life that's led up to that. And that was really comforting in one aspect, but also the work itself looked fascinating.
Unfortunately, it wasn't to be.
So I got rejected from the civil service fast stream, which is, it's one of those things, happens to quite a lot of us. Unfortunately, this was something that I really wanted. So it is a bit of a blow because that would have been, the dream job.
Rachel's also interested in the NHS Graduate Management Training Scheme, which offers a choice of 6 different specialisms.
The one that I've chosen to apply for is the Policy and Strategy Scheme, as this ties in really nicely with my degree. And also I think that the NHS faces some serious challenges over the coming years with an ageing population, the lasting impact of COVID, and the existing backlogs that were already there. So it would be something that I'd be really keen to work within, because I feel like I'd be making a difference, but also something that's really well suited to my strengths and the breadth of my degree.
As well as public sector schemes, she's also been applying for graduate roles in the infrastructure sector.
I'm really passionate about climate change and the climate crisis, and a lot of the roles that I've applied for within the infrastructure sector are energy-based, because green energy, green electricity is ultimately going to need to be the future. So not only is it something that I can really get behind on a personal level, it's also a really good sort of career progression path because it will be something that is in increasing demand as the years go by, which isn't something that can be said for a lot of jobs nowadays. Things change very quickly.
Rachel's hoping that by March she'll know which direction she'll be taking after university.
A couple of my friends have secured grad jobs already after having done this sort of classic summer internship job offer route, and I can't say I'm not a little jealous of them having sorted it out so early. Ideally, I hope to have a job offer. That's the ultimate goal. But I would also just like to be not in another lockdown. I think primarily for me, so much of my university experience has been about COVID that I would like to enjoy my last year as well as focusing on my career ahead.
We'll be back with Rachel later in the programme to see how things turned out in her search for her first graduate job. You're watching the summer briefing on the graduate job market from High Flyers Research. We heard earlier about the kinds of graduate roles that university students from the class of 22 have been applying for and their aspirations and expectations for their first graduate job. But which graduate employers are the most popular this year? Who are the organisations that today's graduates really want to work for? It's time to find out. The Times Top 100 Graduate Employers is the annual guide to the UK's most sought-after graduate employers. It was launched by High Flyers Research in 1999 and has been tracking the country's top employers of graduates ever since. The latest rankings are based on our research with over 12,000 final year students from the class of 2022, who were each asked which employer did they think offered the best career opportunities for new graduates. So let's take a look at the results. We're not going to do the whole countdown, but let's pick out some of the highlights from the new rankings. With so much change and disruption in the graduate job market over the past 2 years, there's been a great deal of change in the top 100 for 2022 as well. We have a total of 14 new entries, including the social media phenomenon TikTok, Specsavers, the high street opticians, and banking group Santander. But motoring in at 66, the BMW Group is confirmed as our highest new entry of the year. The makers of Mini, BMWs and Rolls-Royce cars offers both a UK graduate programme and a global leader development programme. And just ahead of them in the rankings, it's well done to rival car manufacturer Jaguar Land Rover. It's our highest climber of 2022, accelerating up 30 places to number 63. Mac and iPhone maker Apple jumps an impressive 25 places into this year's top 40. After playing such a huge role in fighting the coronavirus pandemic, AstraZeneca was one of our highest climbers in 2021. It's just missed out on a place in the new top 20. It's at number 22. It's currently recruiting around 80 graduates each year to work in research and development, engineering and business roles. We head into the top 20 with strategy consultants McKinsey & Company at number 18. They've got their best result in over 24 years since they joined the Times Top 100 graduate employers. One place ahead, and Clifford Chance is up an impressive 8 places to number 17, and it's officially the top-rated law firm for 2022. We have a non-mover at number 12. JP Morgan takes on over 400 graduates each year to work in banking, asset and wealth management, and technology, mainly through its summer internship program for penultimate year students. But they've been overtaken by rivals Goldman Sachs, who move up 6 places from 17 to number 11, making them this year's highest ranking bank. So those are some of the new entries and movers and shakers. Let's take a look at the top 10 employers for 2022. At number 10, Amazon has delivered its best ever performance, climbing for the 7th year in a row. It's up another 4 places to reach the top 10 for the first time and is recruiting a record 900 new graduates this year. On to number 9, and it's the UK's fastest growing retailer. With a market-leading starting salary of $44,000 for its area manager training program, Aldi has been ranked a top 10 graduate employer every year for the last 16 years. It's down 4 places from last year's number 5. Up next, it's the first of the Big 4 accounting and professional services firms. KPMG is set to hire over 1,000 graduates in 2022 and climbs 2 places from last year's number 10. One place ahead is this year's top-rated media employer. The BBC moves up to its highest position for over a decade at number 7. Our next employer is the second of the major accounting and professional services to be ranked. EY is a non-mover at number 6. Into the top 5, and it's tech giant Google. It's dropped down the rankings in both 2021 and 2020, but it's back up 2 places this year. Our next employer is the third of the Big 4 accounting and professional services firms and is one of the country's biggest and best-known recruiters of students and graduates. Deloitte is a non-mover at number 4. At number 3, PwC is the top-rated accounting and professional services firm in the new Top 100 and is recruiting its biggest ever intake of 1,800 graduates in 2022. The firm was number 1 in our league table for 15 years until 2018, but this year moves down 1 place. And after 2 grueling years at the forefront of the nation's response to the coronavirus pandemic, we salute the NHS at number 2. It moves up 1 place to its highest ever ranking in the top 100. Which brings us to the very top of this year's rankings, and for the 4th year running, the civil service and its prestigious Fast Stream programme is officially the UK's number 1 graduate employer. It's recruited almost 1,000 graduates for different government departments and agencies in 2022. Across the full top 100 list, there are graduate employers in 15 different industries and business sectors, from law, investment banking and accountancy, to engineering, technology and the media. We're going to return now to the employer at number 2 in the new rankings, and I'm delighted that we can speak to Andrew Davidson, Senior Manager for Attraction and Retention at the NHS Leadership Academy. Andrew, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us on our summer briefing. And firstly, many congratulations. Number 2 is a fantastic ranking in the latest Top 100. Tell me a little bit about the graduates that you're recruiting and what this means for the NHS.
Yeah, morning, Martin. Thank you very much for having me today. In terms of the type of people we're recruiting, predominantly it's probably from 3 key areas. So predominantly graduates, but also within in-service staff. So we're looking for people who've achieved well academically, who are passionate about improving health outcomes the public, but also people who generally are looking a bit like Rachel in your documentary, who are keen on making a positive difference, and are looking for somewhere where they can do that and develop a longer term career.
And we should just be clear here that this ranking is based entirely on your management opportunities. It's not about healthcare professionals. So give me an idea of how many graduates you're recruiting at the moment.
Yeah, that's correct. The scheme is specifically for non-clinical leadership development. We have about 600 trainees on the scheme at any one time. The cohort starting in September will be around 250 graduates.
And how long does the training take, and what can new graduates expect in their early years with you?
Yeah, so you mentioned there are six specialisms. All specialisms bar finance, so general management, health informatics, human resources, health analysis, policy and strategy are all 2 years long. Finance is a little longer, and the qualifications that graduates undertake are a little more demanding. So the scheme is 2.5 years for those. But yeah, so all graduates will start on the scheme, and they'll undertake predominantly 2 different placements, either in an acute trust or within a different body or organisation within the NHS, looking at different strategic priorities. So it's a really good opportunity for individuals to tackle some of the biggest challenges the NHS has been facing over the last 2 years, whether that's to do with coming back from the pandemic, looking at elective care, or even very significant operational challenges within trusts in and around potentially bed management. So there's a real diversity in the placements that graduates are going to take, and each individual will have a very consistent journey, but the types of experience they'll undertake will be very unique to them. And what we try and do is develop their pathway on the choices that they take as they start the scheme. So their interests that they develop as they start. If for example they're more interested in elective care, then we would look to try and find placements or work within teams that will enable them to do that.
And finally, Andrew, just tell me how the pandemic's affected your application levels, because at the beginning we were all clapping for the NHS. Now we seem to be worrying about ever-growing waiting lists. How does that public mood change the numbers who apply?
Yeah, we've still seen a very significant number of people applying for the scheme. I think, like the majority of graduate schemes in the UK, they've seen significant challenges in and around how they attract and then select individuals. So when the pandemic hit, we had to act very quickly to change the way that we marketed to students, to graduates, and also within the NHS. So moving a lot of that activity online. There has been an impact, I think, on numbers, but we've seen sort of coming on for around 17,000 people apply this year. So it's still quite significant. I think one of the key challenges that we would like to address over the next year or next 2 or 3 years is actually looking at the type of people and actually trying to target a very diverse mix of graduates, people who potentially wouldn't have considered necessarily applying, but really have the drive and the potential to become outstanding leaders within the NHS.
That's a really positive note to finish on. Andrew, thank you very much for explaining more about the programme and the opportunities that you have on the NHS Graduate Management Training Scheme. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, we'll be publishing the 2022 edition of the Times Top 100 Graduate Employers in September based on these new rankings, and copies of the hardback Careers Guide will be distributed directly to students at 50 key universities across the country. But before that, we'll be including links to the digital edition of the current Top 100 directory and the Top 100 website on our resources page. So you'll be able to see full details of employers' graduate programmes, the universities they target for their recruitment, the different types of vacancies available, and practical information such as their graduate starting salaries and minimum entry requirements. We're live in London for the summer briefing for schools and sixth form colleges on the employment prospects for university graduates. We're going to take a look now at the graduate market in 2022. Earlier this year, we spoke to each of the UK's 100 leading graduate employers to find out about their latest vacancies for university leavers. their graduate starting salaries, and how they recruit their new graduates. Let's start with graduate vacancies. And it's fair to say that recruitment at the nation's top graduate employers has been on something of a rollercoaster ride over the past 15 years. The global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009 meant that almost a quarter of all graduate vacancies were wiped out in just 18 months. And although graduate recruitment bounced back strongly in 2010, it took until 2016 for vacancies to return to the pre-recession high recorded in 2007. After the Brexit referendum, recruitment dipped again in 2017, but grew strongly in both 2019 and 2018, and was set to reach an all-time high in 2020. But the onset of the pandemic meant that employers in almost every industry and business sector were forced to cancel or postpone a significant portion of their graduate intake, and a predicted 3% annual increase in vacancies turned into a 12% drop in graduate jobs. Happily, things have recovered very quickly, and employers stepped up their graduate recruitment by 9% in 2021 and have increased their vacancies by a further 15% this year, taking recruitment to its highest ever level. This substantial rebound means that, like much of the rest of the UK economy, the pandemic caused a V-shaped temporary slump in graduate recruitment, and the vacancies at the top employers have returned to the levels they would have been at if the pandemic hadn't happened. So which industries and business sectors are currently the biggest recruiters of new graduates? Recruitment at the accounting and professional services firms is at its highest ever level, with almost 7,500 vacancies for trainee accountants and tax advisors, consultants and technology graduates. The public sector has more than 4,700 opportunities in local and national government, and on the 5 schemes that are transforming society by bringing new graduates into areas like teaching, children's social work, mental health, policing and the prison service. And more than 5,000 graduates will start work at the country's top engineering and industrial and technology companies this year. The smallest graduate recruiters in 2022 are the oil and energy companies and the charity and voluntary sector. The UK's top graduate employers have always paid generous graduate starting salaries, but between 2012 and last year, average graduate pay increased by just £1,000 in 9 years. This year, with inflation at its highest level for 40 years and employers competing harder for the brightest graduates, starting salaries are on the up again, to a new average of £32,000 in 2022. However, that average masks huge differences in the starting salaries available within different industries and business sectors. The highest salaries in 2022 are at the top city investment banks and law firms, where the average pay for new trainees is now an impressive £50,000. Starting salaries at consulting firms have also increased to an average of £47,500, and new graduates can expect to earn between £35,000 and £40,000 at the country's leading online and high street retailers, banking and financial institutions, and in the oil and energy sector. The lowest pay is typically in the public sector and charities. Now, one thing to note from this latest research with graduate employers is that almost a third of this year's vacancies are expected to be filled by graduates who've already done work experience with the employer whilst at university. And in certain sectors, such as investment banking and law, the majority of graduates are now recruited through work experience programmes, which students take part in either during their second year at university or during a placement year. When asked about the value of work experience, more than half of employers said that without any work experience, the chances of a student being offered a graduate job were low, irrespective of the university they'd studied at or the degree classification they achieved. Now, it's worth remembering just how competitive the graduate job market is, even in a normal year. On average, the country's top employers received 38 applications per graduate vacancy in 2019, the year before the pandemic, with graduate programmes in some of the most sought-after sectors attracting 3 times this level of interest. And finally, the research asked the country's top employers about the universities they targeted during their annual recruitment round, either by going on campus for careers fairs or recruitment presentations, or doing other local promotions. The results for the current academic year show that Manchester, Nottingham and Bristol are the top 3 most targeted universities by the leading UK employers, followed by Birmingham, Leeds, Warwick, Sheffield, Edinburgh and Oxford. If I overlay the rankings in the latest edition of the Times Sunday Times Good University Guide, you'll see that employers' top choices of Manchester and Nottingham don't even make their top 20, nor does Birmingham or Sheffield. And conversely, St Andrews, which is currently rated #1 in the UK by the Good University Guide, is ranked well outside the top 20 by leading graduate employers. Now, these differences are because the Good University Guide takes into account over a dozen different aspects of universities' performance when it evaluates them for the guide, and the employment outcome for graduates is just one of them, whereas employers are primarily interested in how effectively a university prepares its students for their future employment and being able to recruit a diverse range of bright, ambitious and well-motivated graduates. In the week that more than 40,000 Conservative MPs voted to get rid of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, the price of petrol reached £100 a tank, and the war in Ukraine approached its 4th month, it's extremely difficult to predict how the graduate job market will fare over the next 2 or 3 years. But for now, it's very encouraging that graduate recruitment has recovered so quickly from the pandemic, and that the current demand for new graduates is stronger than ever. Lloyds Banking Group is one of the major employers that stepped up its graduate hiring this year, and I'm really pleased to be able to speak to Lisa Dell'Avvocato. She's the bank's group lead for emerging talent strategy. Well, good afternoon. Lovely to see you. Thanks very much for joining us today. Tell me a little bit about, Lisa, about Lloyds Banking Group and its graduate recruitment.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to share some of the insights. So, as you've said, this year we have increased our vacancies. So we are looking for, and we're on track to hire almost 200 graduates this year. And on top of that, we're also on track to hire 210 higher apprentices and degree level apprentices this year. So absolutely, for us, it's been a maintain and, if anything, increase our commitment to early careers through and post pandemic. And certainly we're set to increase our vacancies again next year, particularly with a focus on expanding our technology and our data propositions, whilst also maintaining our other core pipelines into the likes of finance, commercial banking, consumer, insurance, etc. So,
and what's driving that demand? Is it those technology jobs which are, I suppose, fueling the numbers in terms of your intake, or is it across the board in terms of expansion?
Primarily, the demand is coming from our demand to, well, we've always maintained a commitment that in early careers talent is really important to Lloyds. So how we use emerging talent is to build our skills pipelines for the future. And you're absolutely right. Technology demand and requirements is driving a lot of the future demand. So the likes of our cyber intakes, our software engineering intakes, our data science and our data analytics intakes, both at a graduate, postgraduate, and also an apprentice level intake. But we're also seeing maintained and increased demand from other areas like our commercial banking business as well.
And when you're hiring for technology roles, do you need students and graduates who've done computer science degrees, or are you happy to take those from other areas and train them yourself?
It's a mixture. So almost all of our graduate and apprentice programs are available. So if I take graduate programs, they're available to anyone with any degree discipline, a 2 and above. We don't look at UCAS points. We take from every university, and we're really looking at their strengths, their potential, and diversity of thought. The software engineering and our data science graduate programs at the moment, we have a technical assessment, but you absolutely do not require a computer science degree. And of course, we've got people joining this year. I had a look at our successful applicant rate. We've got people who are studying archaeology, geography, so there is a real range. And of course, for our apprentices, we don't require any prerequisite. We recognise that as an employer, we have a really important role to play in education. And that's not just when they're on their apprenticeship or their graduate programme, it goes beyond. And indeed, whilst we're only taking kind of 210 apprentices a year, actually we've got 2,000 apprentices on programme for existing colleagues. So absolutely commitment to ongoing learning whilst they're with their organisation.
So Lisa, that's a very reassuring message, isn't it? That people need a passion for what they're going to come and do with you, as opposed to necessarily studied a relevant degree course. And it's interesting, the balance seems to be 50-50 between the number of apprenticeships you're offering versus graduate roles. Do you see that balance changing in the years ahead?
I hope we maintain the balance. We have, if I look back to 3 years ago, and obviously we've been through a strategic review, the balance was much more in favour of graduates, but actually it's really important to our organisation to offer a variety of entry routes, because university is not for everybody, as you've described. Some people don't want to or don't feel able to go to university, so it's really important to be able to provide people who do have the potential but just choose or don't want to go to university to still have access to excellent career opportunities. I think for us, what we found is, as we started to dial up our apprentice proposition, the business saw how much value our apprentices could add, and demand is accelerating from there. So as soon as we've been able to get the proof points to the business and they see the quality of talent that is coming through, I can only see demand for our hire apprentices increasing. I don't think that will come at the cost of hiring graduates.
Fantastic. So lots of doors marked in at the Lloyds Banking Group. That's brilliant. Lisa, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Lisa Dell'Avvocato from the Lloyds Banking Group. Now, I promised that we'd find out how Rachel Hart, our final year student from Oxford University, was getting on in her job search for her first graduate position. Now, we caught up with Rachel again in March, just a few weeks before her final university exams, and she'd certainly been finding things tough.
Since we last spoke, I have been rejected from around 6 jobs, but I think it's slightly higher. I have one job left, I guess, one that hasn't rejected me as yet, and that is the NHS Policy and Strategy fast stream. And I had the assessment centre for that last Friday, and I felt it went well, and it was more enjoyable than I was anticipating. The people were good, they were good communicators, they were friendly.
Rachel sees this as her dream job and was encouraged to hear about the NHS's focus on diversity and inclusion.
Especially with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic and the health inequalities that has exacerbated. Diversity and inclusion needs to be more than a buzzword, it needs to be rooted into every single organisational structure that exists. And the NHS is an organisation, in my experience, and I'd like to add in my very limited experience, that seems to be doing that.
Unfortunately, Rachel won't hear the outcome of her NHS application until April, so she's had to consider some other options.
So I've applied for a master's here, and I'll hear back about that before then. So in some ways it's a relief, because I think, like a lot of grads, or soon to be grads, the state of the jobs market is actually depressingly bad. And a panic master's, however inane a phrase, is like the best play for me, potentially, if I don't get this.
And Rachel isn't the only one to be finding this year's job market challenging.
I think a lot of people have really given up. And gave up a long time ago, honestly. I think there's a particular generation of people who spent a lot of time living through a pandemic, and that has impacted them in meaningful ways that we won't know about for a good few years. And I think that I love my year group, but we're feeling pretty ground down.
Rachel thinks employers need to be more sympathetic to students applying for graduate jobs.
Student apathy is a phrase that irritates me. Students are never apathetic. Recruiters have to realise that they are sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally falling into the trope of young people don't realise how good they've got it. And actually, young people got it pretty bad.
And she believes there are longer-term issues with the graduate job market.
But financial crisis and the stagnation that caused, and then the coronavirus pandemic means that there aren't as many opportunities as there once were in meaningful ways, like the quality of life, obviously, but also specifically with regard to employment. Meaningful jobs that matter to people, that people care about, that want to, invest their time, money, lives into, because it is fundamentally about what you're doing for the rest of your life.
So some very straight talking from Rachel Hart from the class of 2022. You'll be able to watch the full documentary on the resources page that accompanies today's briefing and see for yourself how the other students we've followed this year have coped with job hunting during a pandemic. You're watching the summer briefing from Highflyers Research on today's graduate employment market. We're going to turn our attention now to degree apprenticeships, how they've been affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and the latest data about the number of sixth form students who are choosing to do degree apprenticeships rather than go to university. Let's start by reminding ourselves about the range of apprenticeships that are available. Now, confusingly, the different levels of apprenticeships are actually labelled from 2 to 7, with levels 2 and 3 leading to qualifications that are equivalent to GCSEs or A-levels. Levels 4 and 5 are higher apprenticeships, which are classed as being the equivalent of a foundation degree. Level 6 is a degree apprenticeship, and Level 7 is the equivalent of completing a master's qualification, although many of these Level 7 apprenticeships are available to sixth form school leavers. In terms of the number of people starting apprenticeships over the past 15 years, there's been a very rapid expansion, and in the period between 2012 and 2017, there were up to 500,000 new apprenticeships in England each year. But following a major reorganisation of the way that apprenticeships are delivered, the number of new apprenticeships fell sharply in both 2018 and 2019 to below 400,000 apprentices a year. And during the pandemic, the numbers dropped even further, with new starts almost halving during the first national lockdown, which meant only around 320,000 apprentices were able to start apprenticeships in 2020 and 2021. Things are now recovering though, and new apprenticeships are expected to return to 2019 levels later this year. Whilst the overall number of apprenticeships may have fallen significantly over the past 5 years, the number of higher and degree apprenticeships, those at levels 4 to 7, has actually increased very rapidly during this period, despite all of the disruption from the pandemic. Fewer than 4,000 higher apprenticeships were started a decade ago. More than 98,000 apprentices began a higher or degree apprenticeship in the last academic year. Now, it's interesting to look at the balance of apprenticeships during the most recent year that full data is available for. Apprenticeships are often talked about as if they're aimed at school leavers or other young people, but half of all apprenticeships in 2020-21 went to apprentices who were 25 or over. And the majority were doing level 2 or level 3 apprenticeships, those that are usually aimed at apprentices who left school or college with GCSEs rather than A-levels. This means fewer than a third of apprentices started a higher or degree level apprenticeship in the last academic year. If we focus specifically on degree apprenticeships, those at levels 6 or 7 that lead to the equivalent of a university degree and a graduate level job, they've risen very quickly since they were first introduced in 2015. By last year, almost 40,000 people began a degree apprenticeship in England, around 1 in 8 of all apprenticeships. But it's important to understand that very few of these degree apprenticeships are currently going to sixth form school leavers. When we look at the choices made by sixth formers who left school in 2020, it's clear that very few opted for the apprenticeship route. Fewer than 4,000 18-year-olds started a higher or degree apprenticeship that year after leaving college. By comparison, almost 258,000 students started a traditional university degree course, the highest ever number recorded in the UK. So although the number of sixth formers choosing to do a higher or degree apprenticeship is definitely increasing, they're still outnumbered by 70 to 1 by those who opt to go to university. For those that are interested in a degree apprenticeship, there are now more than 100 different types of level 6 apprenticeships available. It's an impressive list, from aerospace engineer and cyber security professional to laboratory scientist, midwife and police constable, or a rail systems senior engineer. By definition, each of these are vocational apprenticeships, leading to a very specific role or job title, many of which will be unfamiliar to most sixth formers. And it's not just level 6 opportunities, there are also a growing number of master's level apprenticeships too. So a sixth form school leaver could choose to do a level 7 apprenticeship to become a chartered accountant or tax professional, or train to become a fully qualified solicitor, all while earning a salary and having their training and tuition fees paid for in full by their employer. Now, engineering company Dyson has long been an advocate for providing more effective routes into industry for the nation's school leavers. We can speak now to Alice Shipp, Recruitment and Admissions Manager at the Dyson Institute for Engineering and Technology. Alice, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, Dyson's been a shining example of how an employer takes the reins and starts to deliver its own training. Just give me a quick roundup on how the Institute came into being and what it is you're offering for school leavers.
Absolutely, and thank you for having us this afternoon. It's been a few years in the making. So we were originally founded from James's passion for engineering and supporting future engineers from school age up through to those already at university pursuing engineering. And the Institute was founded off the back of the Higher Education Research Act in 2017 and the change which enabled new providers to set up their own education institution and apply for degree awarding powers. So we were born out of the change in 2017. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of work to start as an independent higher education provider, which is why, as an institution, we initially opened our doors in September 2017 in partnership with the University of Warwick and specifically Warwick Manufacturing Group to deliver a degree apprenticeship over 4 years in engineering. And the aim and aspiration of this programme was to be completely integrated into the workplace here at Dyson. So the programme has always been delivered on campus here at Dyson to enable that full integration between the degree level study and their workplace experience through the apprenticeship elements of the programme.
And Alice, you use a model, you have them on site 3 days a week with time for study in the remainder of the week. How does that balance actually work?
Absolutely. So they're on campus full time here at Dyson. They spend 3 days a week in the workplace within research, design and development here working alongside Dyson engineers, and 2 days a week are focused on their study. So they do have sort of what you would consider traditional lectures as they would have if they were at university, but here on campus at Dyson. And last year, the Dyson Institute was awarded new degree awarding powers. So the students that joined us in September of last year are fully fledged Dyson Institute undergraduates studying a degree delivered and awarded by the Dyson Institute alongside their workplace experience at Dyson.
Very exciting. Now, let's just perhaps look at some of the details. You pay them a salary during the 4 years that they're studying for their degree. And are you providing accommodation as well in Malmesbury?
We do. We're quite unique in the degree apprenticeship market in that respect. So from the first year they join us, they come and live on campus. There's around 40 that we recruit each year, and they live in bespoke, individualised ensuite pods on campus for the whole of their first year. So they really do have everything that they could possibly need on campus and have a little bit more of the sort of traditional university experience in having that on-site accommodation. From second year onwards, they do live off-site, they go and find their own accommodation with our support and either go into sort of more of the local student cities like Bristol and Bath to have that city experience and live in student housing, or as we keep reminding them, they are also professional engineers, so they may be looking at the traditional rental market as well, which we support them with.
Fantastic. Well, it's clearly a hugely popular initiative, and congratulations on being awarded the ability to deliver your own degrees. It's a really exciting development for degree apprentices, for school leavers, and of course for Dyson itself. Alice Shipp, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, another employer who's determined that more sixth formers should choose an apprenticeship is the accounting and professional services firm PwC. And we're joined by Andrew Bargery. He's the firm's senior manager for talent engagement. Andrew, thank you very much for taking part today. Now we've talked about some of the different models that are available for degree apprenticeships. I think one of the things that strikes me is there is a huge variety. Dyson are offering 3 or 4 days in the workplace and then a day of study, all based on a campus experience. Others use a more traditional model, perhaps taking people off-site to study at a particular university. Others do it in batches. So what's the model that you've started with? And I'm thinking in particular for your technology degree apprentices.
Yeah, afternoon, Martin. Thanks very much for having me on today. We've, I think first and foremost, there's an ongoing perception that we're just an we're an accountancy firm. We are an accountancy firm, but we do so much more than that. And our technology degree apprenticeship programs are a testament to that as well. So we have a number of programs that follow a degree apprenticeship pathway, and they are quite different. So we have programs that we run in conjunction with Leeds University, Birmingham University, Queen's University in Belfast, Queen Mary University of London, that all follow although they're a degree apprenticeship program, they all follow a traditional university experience for the individual. So they're fully funded. So an individual who obtained a place on those programs wouldn't have to pay any tuition fees. They're also paid a salary for the duration of what would be a 4-year course. And they have the traditional university experience, but with placements over the summer, and also a full year 3 placement at PwC as well. So
Andrew,
I was explaining this.
Sorry, you mean literally they will start as a fresher at one of the universities you've listed. They'll be sat in the computer science course alongside other students who are paying, over £9,000 a year to be there, and you're actually paying them a salary to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. I was talking about it to a friend of mine actually recently, who said his son was interested in studying a computer science based degree, and I think his comment to me was, "Wow, what's not to love about that?" And yeah, I couldn't agree more. We very recently launched something a little bit different in Manchester that we're running in conjunction with a college called Ada College. We've only launched this a couple of months ago, and this program is, again, it's a technology degree apprenticeship program, but it does follow the more traditional route, whereby it's very much the work first route with some study tagged on. So it's a similar program, but with some differences as well. And I think it's very much, from our perspective, really wanting to offer students the choice. And that's why we have a variety of programs on offer.
And just to go back to why PwC needs so many technology graduates or degree apprentices, have you found that growing your own talent in this way is actually giving you what you need for the business?
Yeah, absolutely. We brand all of our programs under the Flying Start banner, and our very first Flying Start program that we ran, which is a partnership degree program, was with the University of Newcastle, and it was an accountancy program, and that's been running for 20 years now, so very established. And although the accountancy program doesn't follow an apprenticeship framework, I'll definitely try not to confuse the landscape too much. It is quite similar to university experience with placements and almost the guarantee of a job with PwC at the end of it. And we found that model just in terms of the performance of the individuals, the retention that PwC saw was very, very strong. And I think we anticipate seeing similar with our technology programs as well.
Well, some tremendous opportunities. I'm guessing you're probably very heavily oversubscribed for lots of those programs, but some really exciting things for sixth formers to look into and perhaps be making applications for in the year ahead. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us on our summer briefing. Thank you. Now, for more information about which employers offer degree apprenticeship programmes, then the UCAS website includes listings from different organisations, as does the Prospects website, and the government's Find an Apprenticeship portal enables you to search for currently advertised degree apprenticeship programmes as well. Now, I mentioned earlier that all the information and research that we've presented today will be available on the special resources page that accompanies today's briefing. We'll be emailing you the link to the page early next week. Now, there's just time for me to let you know about our plans for Graduate Careers Live, the TV programme that we produced during the pandemic. From this autumn, Graduate Careers Live will be returning as a twice-yearly broadcast to introduce sixth form students at schools and colleges across the UK to the graduate job market and degree apprenticeship programmes. Featuring the very latest research, information and expert insight, sixth formers and their parents will be able to hear directly from the country's best-known graduate employers, their current graduates and degree apprentices, and will discover what it takes to be successful in today's highly competitive graduate employment market. Broadcasting in April and September each year, Graduate Careers Live will showcase many of the most sought-after graduate jobs, from law, banking and accountancy to engineering and technology, and will provide first-hand advice and guidance about which universities, the courses and degree apprenticeships lead to a successful graduate career in the future. The April broadcast will be aimed at the lower sixth as they begin to think about their university entrance and their career options beyond. And when they reach the upper sixth in September, the next broadcast will coincide with their preparations for UCAS and applications for degree apprenticeships. We're really excited to be working with the UK's leading employers to bring you Graduate Careers Live, and we'll be back in touch soon with full details of how your school or sixth form college can access the live broadcasts for your sixth formers and their parents. But for now, our time is up. I hope you've enjoyed today's summer briefing and have found our research on the graduate job market and degree apprenticeships useful. Thank you very much for watching, and from all of us at High Flyers Research, until next time, goodbye.